How do you travel full-time or even on an extended trip when you need to manage a disease like diabetes? Let's find out. Welcome to RV Out West. I'm your host, Brooks. My Family of Four's base camp is located in the beautiful Pacific Northwest, and our RV adventures radiate out from there. Please grab a mug of coffee and join us as we discuss RVing around the American West. From sweet camping spots, gear and equipment, to tips and tricks, we've got you covered. We are RV Out West. November is National Diabetes Awareness Month, and I want to share with you, not only am I a diabetic, but so are millions of other people. Learning to manage this disease is different for everyone, as diabetes affects people differently, as there is no one solution for all. In this episode, we chat with Chris of Type 1 Detour, as both he and his daughter have Type 1 diabetes, and Chris and his family have chosen to live on the road full-time. They do not let this disease slow them down one bit. Chris spills the beans on how they make it work while choosing to live this nomadic lifestyle. Even if you are not diabetic, there are great tips in this episode that you will want to hear. Plus, we discuss the signs and symptoms that you should look out for if you are worried that you or someone in your family may have diabetes. To learn more about Chris and his adventures, you can follow them on Instagram at Type 1 Detour. That's type 1 Detour. Or over on YouTube at Type 1 Detour, or on Facebook and TikTok. So give them a follow and be sure to check out their adventures. Chris, thank you so much for taking the time to chat with us here on RV Out West.
No problem.
So let's start a little bit with, if you wouldn't mind, I'd love to hear a bit of your backstory. So perhaps how you ended up full-timing.
Yeah, absolutely. We were kind of just sitting at home during summer 2020. We wanted to get out there and travel full time and explore more. And I just was like, you know what, let's just do it now. So I just started researching it, just went online, went to YouTube University real quick, did a couple searches. I realized that there were families out there that lived in an RV full time with kids. And I was like, oh, okay, so this is actually a thing. We had never camped before. We camped a few times in our life. So it wasn't like we already had an RV. We never even stepped foot in an RV before. We just thought, this seems fun. It seems scary. Let's just go ahead and do it. And, we planned for probably, I guess, about 10 months or so until we finally had our RV and we were hitting the road. So it was took a lot of time, a lot of planning, a lot of research, a lot of overthinking also, where I think if we didn't overthink so much, we probably would have started even sooner than what we did. But that's kind of the quick backstory of how we went from living in a house to living in an RV within, a year or so.
Wow, that's pretty amazing. For work, did you transition what you were doing for work to be able to continue to make money while you're on the road?
Yes. Yeah, I definitely did. So at that time, I was a realtor. Probably one of the hardest jobs to to do if you don't actually live in a specific location. I decided to go ahead and get my mortgage license and just originate mortgages and use all of my contacts and all of my colleagues in the real estate world and use them for referrals. That was what I did up until earlier this year, that I just went back to my background in digital marketing. I'd owned a marketing business for 15 years or so before I was a realtor. Got back into doing digital marketing consultant, social media stuff, and just overall content creation.
That's amazing. Share with us one of your greatest adventures that you guys have now that you've been on the road now for the last 2-ish plus years.
I would say overall, probably what is most memorable and our favorite place that we've been to so far is Zion National Park. To us, that was kind of like, we had always seen people going there. We saw all the pictures on Instagram before we went. And when we first started, we launched from the East Coast. So we stayed on the East Coast for our first full year. So once we actually made it out west and went to Zion, it was just like a totally different world. I felt like I was on a different planet. That really kind of stuck with us then of like, wow, this is pretty amazing what this country has to offer, going from Acadia in the far northeast over to Zion. It's two totally different worlds and planets almost.
Well, given that we are chatting in November, so if you wouldn't mind, can you share your diagnosis story for yourself? And if you don't mind, I believe from what I've read online about you guys too, one of your children has it too. So maybe kind of how you piece the puzzles together and the signs that you saw about your child before you kind of got your child tested.
Absolutely. So I was a freshman in college. I was playing college football. I started just kind of losing weight, was drinking a ton of water. I was, going to the bathroom constantly because I was drinking a lot of water. I thought I was losing weight because I was working out. Then I just started to lose interest in things that I was very passionate about. I just didn't have the energy to get up to go work out anymore. And then I just one day got very sick. One of my college roommates was there and said, "You're going to the ER, man. Like you look horrible." So I ended up going to the ER, and I had a blood sugar of 858. Normal between 90 and 110 ish or so. So 8 times what you should be. And that's when I was diagnosed when I was 19. Greatest, best shape of my life, but still was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes. Changed my life at that point then, because I was almost went into a coma, and I decided to transfer schools and just say, like, hey, it's life's short. I don't want to go to school here anymore. I want to go to this was in Pennsylvania, in Wilkes-Barre, Pennsylvania. So I decided to go to college in Florida then. It's where I met my now wife. We got married. I lived in Florida for a while. And then I guess fast forward. So that was in 2004. So I'm coming up on April 2024 will be 20 years that I've had type 1 diabetes. And in 2018, I believe it was in February, 2 days before Valentine's Day, in February 12th, 2018, my, at that time, almost 5-year-old daughter was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes. So she is 8, going on 9 now. So we have, 2 people traveling the country full time with type 1 diabetes. And out of all the research, all the things that were holding us back to go full time, the number one and pretty obvious thing was, how are we going to live full time on the road with diabetes? How are we going to get supplies? How are we going to find doctors, hospitals, what if there's an emergency? All those things were really what held us back from even thinking that it was even possible to live full time. And then we just kind of put a plan together, and we're now over 2.5 years on the road full time, still managing type 1 diabetes for the both of us, and still, getting our supplies, doing everything we need to do. So it's definitely been a journey.
Yeah, I can imagine. I mean, so I'll share my story. My story was I was 38 years old, and I just was having a routine physical. At the time, I was into CrossFit, and I was doing CrossFit 3 to 4 times a week. I was working out, again, pretty good shape for being in a 38-year-old, and just went to have a routine physical and full blood panel. And, hey, we'll give you a call in a week when we get the results. And 3 hours later, the doctor calls and goes, your fasting glucose is 350. I was like, wow. Okay, what does that mean? He goes, it means you're diabetic. Yeah. I was like, what? Now, my dad has been a type 1 since he was 6. So it's always kind of been in the back of my mind that, hey, maybe, but at 38, right. And I did not treat my body well in my 20s. I was like, wow, I dodged a bullet. And then at 38, I found out I have LADA, which is type 1.5 for those listeners who are not familiar with what LADA is. But LADA is essentially latent autoimmune diabetes in adults. So it's a very small fraction of people who get it. It's 2 to 12% of the people who get that kind of diabetes in adulthood. So I first was being treated like I was type 2. And then eventually they're like, no, you really need to go on insulin therapy. And eventually we need to get you on a pump.
So my wife when she met me, she knew nothing about diabetes. I told her when we first started dating, now she manages not just our daughter's diabetes, but half the time I'm like, hey, how many carbs are in this dinner? So she definitely has, was kind of forced into it when our daughter was diagnosed. And, when it was just me, she knew what to do if I was, low or whatnot, but I just managed it, and I didn't put that burden on her at all. But then once our daughter was diagnosed, she kind of, stepped up, and she's been unbelievable, and it's been, absolutely amazing in doing that.
So tell me a little bit about kind of how did you guys figure out that your daughter, when she was 4.5, 5, you said, was she exhibiting the drinking water, going pee a lot, and those kind of standard symptoms, or was it all of a sudden she just wasn't feeling well, and you're like, we got to go to the doctor?
Yeah, so we kind of knew, the statistics that are out there with fathers who are type one. Their children have a higher risk than if the mother has type one. We had thought about getting her tested when she was younger. Rewind even further to way even before this. I used to write a diabetes blog, and I had worked with the Diabetes Research Institute out of the University of Miami for years on kind of learning about some of the research, and I knew eventually I would want to have a family, and I wanted to know, are there certain things that I can do to help try to prevent my future children from having type one. So when it comes down to it, you're either born with the genes or you're born without them, and that's just where it is. Where it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. If you do have those genes, we decided not to do any of that testing because we didn't want to know, like, okay, this is coming in the future. We just have to wait for what day it's actually going to be. So we chose not to do that. We started to notice that she was beginning to wet the bed after she had stopped doing it. So we noticed that, she was not waking up, going to the bathroom in the middle of the night for months and months and months. And then all of a sudden, we noticed her drinking a little bit more water at nighttime. And then we noticed her waking up in the middle of the night, crying because she wet the bed. And then it was one day, we just thought, like, okay, let's test her ketones, because I didn't want to prick her finger. We tested her ketones. It was maybe like 2-3 o'clock in the morning, because she had woken up. She had to use the bathroom. We tested her ketones, and they were positive. Now, I knew that you can sometimes have, small trace amount of, if you're just sick or you have a virus, something like that. So in my mind, I'm like, okay, that's what it is. That's what it is. The next day, we woke up. We were having a blizzard, a blizzard in Pennsylvania. It was in February. We had probably close to a foot of snow. We decided I was like, well, we just have to check her sugar, and we'll do it. So we pricked her finger. We checked it. These meters take usually 5 seconds to give you a result. And when I say this was the longest 5 seconds of my life, I mean, it was the longest 5 seconds of my life waiting. And I just saw the number pop up, and it said 248. And I'll never forget that number. And I saw the number, and I just, I knew I had to kind of stay strong. I wanted to break down right then and there, but I knew, my wife was going to. I had to stay strong. So I just said, all right, this is it. We got to go to the ER. It's happened. There's nothing we can do about it at this point. We did everything we could do to try to prevent it. It didn't work.
Yep.
She's type 1, and I've been type 1 for, at that point, 15 years. So I know what we need to do. So let's just go attack this. So it's kind of what we did. Then we went to the ER, and immediately they drew, took labs of her, and they were like, yeah, she's type 1. So we spent,
Yep.
I think
24, 48 hours.
Yeah, about 2 or 3 days in the hospital. And then we got released, and then that was it. And then it was, kind of relearning everything. If anything,
Did you go straight to pump therapy right then and there?
we could
with her?
We could not. So they would not, insurance would not approve a insulin pump or a CGM for
CGM?
at least, the CGM took almost 6 months, I believe, for them to approve.
Really?
The pump we went on, I think, after about 3 months. So I'd been using an insulin pump for 15 years already, and I
Mhm.
just changed brands to a different insulin pump, and that's the one we wanted her on as well. So I was really fighting with the doctors, like, listen, I know what I'm doing, I know how to do this stuff, just let me put it on her. And then finally we were able to get the CGM approved, but I mean, that was a battle as well. So I think we got it right around 5 months, I think, and they didn't want to do it until 6 months, but we were able to get it. So
Let's pause and hear a word from our friends over at RV Destination Magazine. RV Destinations Magazine is the premier provider of nationwide RV destination articles, sharing stories about the places you want to see for yourself. Subscribe today for digital or their new print magazine at rvdestinationmagazine.com. So one of my questions about you guys now being full-time living on the road and managing your diabetes, honestly, how do you get your insulin?
so before we launched, I guess is the word people use. So before we left for full time, we we didn't stockpile because you can't really stockpile, but every month, depending on the supply. So for insulin, we use the insulin pen vials for my daughter. Even though she doesn't use an insulin pen, we use those vials because we like those ones. And she uses 2 of those a month, but they come in a box of 5. That's the minimum you can buy them in. Every month she gets 5, she only uses 2. So every single month we are gaining 3 extra vials of insulin. So this had been going on for, a year or 2 before we went full time. And insulin has a pretty long expiration date as long as it's not been used, as long as it's still in the fridge. So we were able to take a bunch of that insulin and be able to hit the road with that. Before we
Can I ask another? Sorry to interrupt, but I'm really curious. So on travel days, then,
Mhm.
right? I worry even. I mean, my longest I've done travel days is we've done about 5-6 weeks on the road. And so during that time, right, when I'm traveling and on travel days, I don't travel with the fridge on, and I turn my propane off. But as long as we don't open the door, it stays relatively cold on a 6-12 hour travel day or whatever it might be.
Right.
But have you had any problems with major fluctuation in temperatures in your fridge between travel days and non-travel days? You're fine. You're usually hooked up, but
Right.
I'm
So
just curious how you've managed that too.
So one of the our must-haves when we were shopping for rigs was a residential fridge. So we have a residential fridge. It's runs off electricity only. It's not a propane and electric one. It is a regular Samsung fridge that you would have in your house. So that was a mandatory must-have. We will not get any rig that doesn't have one.
And so it runs on DC power. So you're running off your house batteries during that time.
Correct.
When on travel day.
Yes, and so
Awesome.
we
Okay.
have an inverter. It runs off the house batteries. And we have sensors in the fridge to alert us if temperatures do change, and they don't. Now we also don't boondock often. We are full time RVers, but we like our full hookups. So we didn't necessarily,
Especially with children.
yes, exactly. And we didn't necessarily choose this lifestyle to live off grid. We did it to travel, but to still have a washer and dryer in our home, to be able to shower every single day, and drink water, and do all the things you would normally do in a house. So that was kind of our way of doing it. Like I said, before we went, we've never been in an RV. We never slept in. I mean, I think I did when I was like younger. I think my grandparents had an RV, but all I remembered about RVs was some of my friends that had them. They would plug the fridge in 2 days before they went camping in order to get the fridge at the right temperature and everything.
That's me.
Yeah. So I was
That's
like,
what I have to do.
How is this going to work? And then I started researching RVs and seeing that you could have a residential fridge inside an RV, and we were like, oh yeah, we want one of those. That was one of the ways that diabetes definitely played a role in making a decision on what kind of rig that we were going to get.
And that's a very important one. So sorry, and I digressed or changed this, but back to manage. So how are you getting your scripts when you're on the road?
So we do it 3 different ways. Well, I guess 4. And First way that we do it is we use a national pharmacy. So there are several different ones out there: CVS, Walgreens, Walmart. Target is CVS, but if you use a national pharmacy, you can get your prescriptions, transferred to any pharmacy across the country. Now, insurance plays a major role in that, and that's a different subject or a different part of it. But, if we have a CVS prescription at a CVS in Pennsylvania, my hometown, when I'm in Florida for the winter and we're traveling all around Florida, when it's time to refill that, I can call the pharmacy wherever, the CVS near me in Florida, and say, hey, can you transfer this prescription from Pennsylvania to Florida? They do it, and the prescription's ready in an hour. So we're able to do that. Some of the supplies are mail order. So
like pump supplies are definitely mail order.
Yes.
I don't pick my pump supplies up at a Target or a Walgreens
Correct.
or at a pharmacy.
Yeah. So our pump supplies and our Dexcom CGM supplies are mail order. So wherever we're going to be at that time, I just change our shipping address. So if I know I'm going to be at a campground, I'll call ahead to the campground and say, hey, do you guys allow packages? If they don't allow packages, or we're at like a state park, national park campground that maybe doesn't do packages, we'll find a local post office that does general delivery.
Yeah, or a UPS store or something like that,
exactly.
I guess.
Yep.
Yeah.
So then we'll have it shipped there. Some, depending on assurances, and this is where things kind of changed for us earlier this year when I left my mortgage job, because when I had that job, I was a salaried employee, a W-2 employee. So I had insurance through the company, and that insurance worked anywhere across the country. No matter where I was, I could walk in, give my insurance, and the pharmacy would cover, fill it. Now that I am back to kind of freelance 1099 employee, I have state-based insurance through the state of Pennsylvania. And state-based insurance is exactly that. You can only use it in your state. So when we were in Pennsylvania, I can go to any pharmacy across the state of Pennsylvania and I can pick up a prescription. But right now, while I'm in Florida, my insurance will not cover picking up a prescription in the state of Florida.
You have friends or family in Pennsylvania who can pick up and then just turn
so
around
we have
drop
so
to?
My parents still live in Pennsylvania, and they go and pick up our prescriptions. So that is kind of
nice.
Your workaround. Way number 3. And, so they'll pick them up. And grandparents always want to send a little care package anyway. And,
to the kids.
Toys our kids
which is
don't
awesome.
need. So, they always got their stuff in there. So that's what we do. Then we just create a shipping label or give the address, and then they send them usually once a month or so. And then the final kind of bonus tip, if you will, is if something does allow for a 90-day prescription, we will always take the 90-day prescription, because that's just
I 100% agree.
Less of a hassle.
Yeah.
And now we only have to worry about it every 3 months as opposed to every 30 days. So some things,
I get all of my stuff.
Yeah. Some things. And like I said, the insurance sometimes is a little weird, depends on your insurance. Some of our things, like our insulin, we can only get 30-day supplies. Which
I do 90. I can get 90 days.
We used to. So when I had my other insurance, I was able to get 90 days. But now through the state-based, health care plan that we have, you can only do 30 days.
Only do 30. Hey, we are almost out of time, and I have an important question I want to ask you.
Absolutely.
So I'm a big snowboarder. I know you Floridians don't know what that means, but hey, it's like surfing on the frozen version of snow. But I used to also be a really big hiker and backpacker, and I have not hiked as much because of my diabetes. I get really anxious being away from services and having a low, and it really is messing with me mentally. Things I love to do, I'm now scared isn't the right word, but I'm scared to go do it.
Absolutely.
Like my mountain, the mountain that we go to where we go skiing is where I grew up on the mountain. And so I'm like, I know every nick and cranny of this particular mountain. And there's this backside that's got beautiful terrain. And I won't take my kids on the backside because now all of a sudden I'm 3 chairlifts to getting to the lodge.
Right.
And full disclosure, right? I've got my ski park. I mean, I got packages of gummy bears. I have emergency liquid glucose. I've got the gross glucose tabs. Like it's the amount of sugar I have on me is ridiculous.
Right.
So I could curb any particular low I have. So it's not like I'm going to have a seizure on the backside of the mountain.
Right.
But how have you experienced that anxiety when you've been just, day hiking with your family, even though you've got backpack full of sugar? Or what are you kind of doing to help mitigate that?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's fear, anxiety, whatever you want to call it. I think of probably pretty much anybody that knows that they have a medical condition that can cause some pretty serious damage. And just going full time in general was my wife was freaked out about it, scared, like, where is the nearest hospital going to be? Are we going to be, camping in the middle of nowhere? It's going to take 2 hours to get to a hospital, So we thought about those things. I've always been well prepared, as prepared as you can be, like you said.
Yeah. Right.
And I really, at this point now, I am doing everything that I can to set an example for my daughter that whatever you want to do, it's on
You can do it.
You can do it. It's if you don't do it, it's on you. It's not your diabetes, it's on you. You can, and I know people always
That's
say,
awesome.
don't let diabetes stop you. Like, but I also tell her, like, hey, listen, sometimes diabetes is going to stop you, that's not, it's kind of an unpopular opinion, but that's what I
That's
kind of
the truth. That's the truth.
It's the truth. But it might,
absolutely.
I just try to explain to her, it doesn't have to stop you. It will slow you down. There's no doubt about it. There are times where it will slow you down, but as long as you can overcome it, you can conquer it. You do it once. And we have been on hikes where her blood sugar, my blood sugar have dropped down into like the 40s, and we just stopped. And we had juice, we had snacks, we did everything. And then we just kind of just hang out a little bit, and we just sit there and let the blood sugars come back up, and you enjoy the view a little bit more there. So there are times where I go out on hikes by myself, without my wife and the kids, and I would say my wife is more freaked out than I am. I have to stay in constant communication with her, and we have radios and texting and phone calls, and I make sure that I have enough juices to where, not just juices, but I also bring extra insulin, supplies, everything that I would need for potentially up 24 to 48 hours. If something happened to me and it was going to take 24 to 48 hours for, the medics to find me, or, a search team to find me, then I make sure that I have enough of that on me for that. What am I going to do? I'm not going to do this, and I'm not going to set the example, for my daughter, that I'm going to let diabetes, defeat me. And that's just, it's almost just like a competitive nature to me. But that thought is always in the back of my mind. And it is something that, unfortunately, with type 1 diabetes, it's 24/7. It's always on your mind. You're always thinking every single decision you make. Literally, before we just hopped on this to record, I had to make sure, where's my blood sugar at? Because I don't want to be chewing candy or drinking juice in the middle of recording a podcast. So it's literally 24/7 job. You understand it, but it's something, and that's one reason why we really wanted to document our journey, because we were scared to do it, and we did it, and we realized, like, oh, this is not as difficult as what it was. And we want to make sure other people, whether it's type 1 diabetes or any medical condition that's maybe holding somebody back, like, just go do it.
Please remember that RV Destinations magazine is offering a discount code for RV Out West listeners. Just use code RV Out West 10 to receive 10% off of a subscription. You can sign up on their website at rvdestinationsmagazine.com. Thank you so much for listening. If you have an idea for a topic you'd like me to discuss, please contact me via rvoutwest.com. I would also encourage you to start using hashtag RVOutWest for your social media posts. Share with our community about your camping and RV adventures that you've taken here in the Pacific Northwest. Our next episode, we're going to spill the beans in our pit stop about the downsides of RVing. I want to share what I've learned about the bad things that can and will happen to you while you are RVing. In the spirit of preparedness, I want you to know what you are potentially getting into before you make the leap into your first rig or maybe your next larger rig. Thanks so much for listening to RV Out West. Join us again in 2 weeks with our next episode. Please like and subscribe to our podcast on iTunes or wherever you choose to get your podcasts so you never miss an episode. And I sure would appreciate if you left a rating or a review of the show. Special thanks to Scott Holmes Music for providing the intro song, We Are One. RV Out West can be found on Instagram and Facebook, where you can interact with us and follow along on our RV adventures around the Pacific Northwest. So get out there, explore, and go see what's beyond the horizon.